changing who I am. I'm making a new plan, rearranging my life, and I won't look back ever again.
Hello and welcome back to Stitchin' Witch. I'm your host, Hikari Rose, and today we are going to be talking about how to construct your cosplay. We left off last time having bought our materials. Now we're going to put them together. For this, I'm going to talk through construction from simpler to complicated and throw in tips and things to keep in mind to make your life a little easier. Starting off with modifying already constructed clothes, it's things that you can find at, say, a thrift store or at other Starting off with modifying already constructed clothes that you find at like a thrift store or at normal clothes stores. Depending on how lucky you get, they might be perfect for what you need, or they might need a little bit more love, like different buttons, painted on details, or sewn on elements. However, sometimes you just have to make it from scratch. The first thing to think about is if the piece is something we want to run through the washing machine, as some materials won't hold up to washing, which can limit your options. So if you're working on outerwear like a coat, then you might be able to get away with using materials that shouldn't be washed, like wool or delicate fabric, but you'll probably want to use different materials for inner layers, such as shirts or pants that have direct skin contact or something you might sweat into. Now, when it comes to sewing, we talked last time about sewing patterns, one of your best friends when constructing. In each envelope are instructions and the actual pattern. To use them, you'll have to cut out the pattern pieces and then pin them to the fabric to cut out. On each pattern piece, it will tell you how many you need to cut out, any lining pieces needed, and any needed interfacing pieces. The pattern piece might also have these arrows on them telling you how to orient the pattern on the fabric. Since you want to minimize waste, I would recommend laying everything down and then move the pieces on the fabric until you are satisfied with the arrangement. After all, you can only cut once, but you can rearrange forever. So make sure you like your decision. Once you like the layout, pin the pattern down. For those of you who aren't sure what that means, these are sewing pins. These are used to temporarily hold things together, whether patterned to fabric or holding pieces together under the sewing machine. Just make sure you pull them out before getting to the needle of the machine, because if the needle hits one of the pins, it could break the needle. And while they are replaceable, it's annoying to have to stop and do it, and it's really easy to avoid with a little bit of best practice. Now, when pinning things together, you're going to first line up the two pieces and start pinning from one end to the other. To pin, take the pin and go through both pieces and then slide it about 1/3 to 1/4 of the way down. Then go back through both pieces until you're back on the side you started on. Do this every couple of inches, although on things like stretchy material or on curves, you'll probably want to use more pins to keep everything where it's supposed to be. Then, after you sew up the seam, depending on the type of fabric, you might want to press the seam as it makes everything look a little nicer. With construction out of the way, let's go over some details you might need to add or change, starting with buttons. Now, most fabric stores sell buttons of many sizes and styles, and if you can't find what you want in person, online retailers are a good option. However, if what you need is super specific, you might need to make custom ones. A good option for if you don't need to wash the piece is craft foam, also called EVA foam, painted and then attached to blank buttons and sewn on. Or, if the buttons are fabric covered, they sell kits to make that style of button as well. Next up is details on other locations on the piece. Some details are more simplistic, like lines, dots, identification marks, and so on, all the way up to big designs on the back of the piece, like logos and such. And depending on what you're going for and you're covered with a sewing machine, you have some options. The easiest option is fabric paint. Just make sure you read the instructions for whichever brand you choose, as some work better on some materials and won't work at all on others. And some need to be set with a clothes iron, so make sure you check. For a clean look with paint, I would recommend some type of guide for where and what you want to paint, which can range from drawing on the guides with like a pencil or using painter's tape, depending on how clean you want it or how steady a hand you have. One thing I want to mention is people will make stencils with painter's tape by first laying out strips of tape slightly overlapping, drawing out the design, cutting it out with an X-Acto knife, and then applying it to the garment, and then painting over it. Very good for clean writing or logos or identification markers. Very good for sci-fi settings. If you're comfortable with sewing, there are also options that are better for a more 3D look and more durable in general. You could do some by hand sewing, but a machine is way easier and faster. For lines or colored hems, bias tape is a good option, as it comes in a variety of colors and widths. The only downside is that it comes in set colors, so unless you feel like dyeing it, what you see is what you get. Although, side note, dyeing any of the fabric options I've brought up is viable if time-consuming option, and sometimes it could be your best option for super specific things. For example, Mia from Skate the Infinity. He has these bright yellow Converse style shoes that I could not find anywhere, but I could find white ones. So I got a bottle of yellow Rit dye, covered the parts to protect them, and spent a couple days coloring them with really good results, but getting back on track for doing large logos or designs. A good, if time-consuming method is basically to make an applique. To do so, you cut out these shapes and attach them with a product called Wonder Under or Iron-On interfacing. As the name suggests, it is attached by heating it up with a clothes iron. After you do that, you can go around the edges of your applique with a tight zigzag style stitch to keep anything from fraying. These are a few ideas to get you started, but that's all I have for right now. Next time, we will talk about how to layer armor onto your design. So keep on stitching, and I'll see you next time.
And when I feel like this, I'm immortal. When I feel like this, I'm immortal. When I